The Jewish belief is that Moses is not the author of the Torah. GD is the author, Moses was just the scribe who wrote what he was told to write. Accordingly, the explanations for the final verses is that either it was Joshua who wrote what GD told him to write, or Moses who wrote, in advance of his death, what GD told him to write. Really not a difficult question, but there are many who will clutch strings to attack our belief. On a related note, a good example is below by Dick Harfield, who said in his answer to this question, evidence for the quite late date of writing is found in the eulogy to Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 10. And there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. In that one short verse, the author, perhaps inadvertently, acknowledges that he lives in Israel, a nation that was not yet formed when Moses supposedly lived, and that Moses belonged in the distant past. So there you have it, conclusive evidence, right? Let's expand that quote to the surrounding sentences. Had to pull out an ArtScroll Chumash for a decent translation, couldn't stand the Christian ones on the net. The children of Israel wept for Moses, so the children of Israel obeyed him. Never again has there arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom Hashem had known face to face. All the great awesomeness that Moses performed before the eyes of all Israel. Is Israel, in verse 34-10, a geographical location, as Dirk contends, acknowledges that he lives in Israel, or referring to the people of Israel? Firstly, it is clear from the surrounding sentences that the people were already called children of Israel, and from the final verse of the Torah that the name Israel by itself is directed to the people and not the land, unless the land grew eyes. Secondly, it is clear from the context that when you are talking about a prophet arising, it is from a people and not a geographic location. Moses, if he ever existed, had no part in writing the Torah, or Pentateuch. Biblical scholars say that it was actually written by a number of different sources, over a period of several centuries during the first millennium BCE. The Book of Deuteronomy, which reports the death of Moses, is believed largely to have been written by an anonymous author, now known as the Deuteronomist, during the 7th century BCE reign of King Josiah. Evidence for the quite late date of writing is found in the eulogy to Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 10. And there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. In that one short verse, the author, perhaps inadvertently, acknowledges that he lives in Israel, a nation that was not yet formed when Moses supposedly lived, and that Moses belonged in the distant past. As noted by one writer, it is a disagreement among the sages. One opinion holds that his disciple wrote these pasukim, and the other opinion says that Moshe himself wrote them while in tears. This means as he was in the process of dying he wrote these lines according to the Maharal. For those asserting that Moshe was a fictitious character, a critical, intellectual, and honest analysis of the narrative of God's revelation at Har Sinai would be a reliable way to determine the truth of the Torah narrative. There are many sites online addressing the issue. I recommend Lawrence Kellerman's presentation on the subject. There is a disagreement in the Talmud, Bava Batra 15a. Rabbi Yehuda said that the last 8 verses were written by Joshua after Moses' passing, and Rabbi Shimon said that the last 8 verses were written by Moses, the Holy One, dictated and Moses transcribed in tears.